Today on Church Public, New York Times supports cannibalism, apparently. Crayola is also now trans or something. Latinx, Latinx, whatever it is not a Spanish word, and Argentina now agrees. Finally, we have a story of Planned Parenthood that wants to open reproductive, quote-unquote, health clinics in schools in California. They want to open the clinic inside the high school in California. So that's something. We'll talk about those things and more here on Church Public. I'm Matt Odegaard. Let's get started. Welcome back to Church Public. I'm Matt Odegaard, your host as always, and I appreciate you stopping by today. If you're an audio listener, I really appreciate you. If you like this, you want to hit subscribe if you haven't already, and go ahead and leave a 5-star review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you happen to be. If you want to send this to somebody, that's super helpful because I'm just trying to get the word out about what is going on in this crazy world and how we deal with it as a Christian. How do you deal with these current events from a Christian perspective and live in this real world but still keep your faith? More and more, this seems to be a complicated issue, and I want to help you unravel that if I can. If you want to see some of the video, and we'll look at a couple of videos today, you can go to churchpublic.com, go to the podcast tab, and see the videos there. And usually, it will be available on YouTube, though I've been getting a couple hits lately, so I'm really not sure how long that'll be. Somehow, I will get the video to you one way or another. churchpublic.com/podcast is the best place for you to check that out. All right, what do we have going on today? We have a couple of interesting, weird stories. We'll see how things go. The first one is cannibalism. I don't know what to say about this, but this came out over the weekend, July 23rd. The New York Times decided to support cannibalism. Like, seriously, people, this isn't a joke. This is just what's going on. The New York Times publishes an article, and it is in apparently the opinion page, but like according to this tweet, if you're just listening, I'm showing you the tweet from the New York Times from July 23rd. It apparently was an opinion piece, but I mean, who knows at this point? I'm just going to read you word for word this tweet that went out on July 23rd. Cannibalism has a time and a place. Some recent books, films, and shows suggest that time is now. Can you stomach it? ? And then the article linked in it is, quote, a taste for cannibalism. This is the article from the New York Times. Now, I read through most of the article. It does seem this tweet is more like clickbaity than actual suggestion, apparently, because it really talks about some shows and movies and books that apparently are embracing the idea of cannibalism these days. But why make this suggestion in the first place? And why phrase it like this in the first place? I mean, they're basically saying, can you stomach cannibalism? Do you have a taste for cannibalism? And recently, as we've seen and talked about here, there's a push by the World Economic Forum and even superstar celebrity actress Nicole Kidman, which I played a couple of days ago. If you missed that, you can go and watch that at churchpublic.com, where she says you should eat bugs. It's really good to eat bugs. 2 billion people in the world eat bugs, so you should be one of them too. Now, of course, she doesn't mention that the 2 billion people in the world who eat bugs mostly are forced to eat bugs because there's no other food, whereas in civilized countries, first world countries, they generally don't eat bugs because you don't have to eat bugs. And who really wants to eat bugs? Apparently Nicole Kidman and the World Economic Forum and the New York Times not only want you to eat bugs, but also people. I mean, bugs, that's gross enough, but I guess now we have to eat your neighbor. Times have changed. Side note, more and more, in this post-Christian world, we seem to be going back to a pre-Christian world. I want to unpack that. We're in a post-Christian world. We went through this, perhaps you'd say golden years, whatever you want to call it, where we went through this time where everything, ostensibly was going really good and everything was looking really nice in terms of freedom of religion and especially freedom of Christianity. But recently we've moved past that, not just away from it, but past it. So I and others are calling that a post-Christian world. We really are beyond Christian. Now, most people are some sort of secular, humanist, liberal, whatever. But really, more and more, what I'm seeing, if you take just cultural generalities and historical context, is pre-Christian world. Christians, by and large, came in, and I talked about this the other day when we talked about Norway and some of the Slavic, the countries up there where, they had their pagan deities and they sacrificed sometimes people to them. and did all kinds of wacky witchcraft things. You can see that in the English and the Norman Saxons, the French, who came in and conquered some of these more pagan people and introduced Christianity into these worlds and really civilized them, not just in a social and economic context, but in a context of religion where they stopped people from sacrificing babies and humans and other weird sexual rituals and cult rituals and witchcraft and all sorts of other demonic activity. And we literally have gone back around again. It's not even just pendulum where like you're on pagan one time and then you go to Christianity and then back to pagan. I mean, that's kind of it, but we're really like back around again where we're just doing all kinds of crazy pagan rituals. I've talked to you about witchcraft. I've talked to you about tarot cards. I've talked to you about all sorts of things. There was a story that I was following that I didn't have time to write up today about now there is a movement to queer tarot cards. So we're combining witchcraft and LGBTQAAIP #$ and all of these worlds are coming together to like a pre-Christian pagan worldview. We're in this new sort of thing. And now what we're seeing is, I guess, a callback to cannibalism. Like seriously, people, we have lost our minds and we got to get back to some kind of reality. I miss those good old days where you could just go and get a juicy hamburger with your wife and kids and be happy. But apparently that is gone now. Anywho, this article, it does actually just seem to promote books and shows and media that are now apparently more interested in cannibalism as opposed to previous movies that we've seen and experienced several years ago, like Alive, where the plane crashed and they had to eat each other, Fried Green Tomatoes, where somebody killed somebody and ate him, and of course, the character Hannibal Lecter, which is terrifying, about eating people. This article points to books and shows and movies that feature this gruesome act. They mention A Certain Hunger, Yellow Jackets, Lapvona. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce that one, but whatever. I'm not familiar with that one. Anyway, and there's a bunch of others, and I'm not going to read them because I don't really care. But according to this article, the themes of eating humans before like 2020 and these food shortages were not a thing, and now apparently it's a thing. So hopefully there's not actually a large number of people who desire human flesh, but apparently there are some. A Swedish scientist named Magnus Soderlund. Again, we're back to like the Norwegians, the Swedes, the Finn. Like, why are these people over there going so pagan and trying to eat people? Anyway, the scientist Magnus Soderlund said, by eating human meat, we might, this is a real quote, people, by eating human meat, we might be able to save the human race if only the world could, quote, awaken to the idea, he says, conservative taboos against cannibalism can change over time if people simply tried eating human flesh, end quote. Oh, dear Lord. Okay, so apparently he was hesitant to actually commit to being a cannibal himself, but he might start with pets and bugs. This is a real quote. Again, we're back to the bugs. And apparently pets too. These poor pets. What did they ever do? Anyway, he also said, quote, I feel somewhat hesitant, but to not appear overly conservative, I'd have to say I'd be open to at least tasting it, referring to, again, human flesh. Seriously, Jesus, what is going on here? Anyway, we have reached just ultimate weirdness. And I think we've hit the bottom and like nothing weirder could happen. And then we're to cannibalism. So, welcome to reality. Please love your family and just eat delicious foods that God has prepared. And read Genesis 1 and 2, that God has prepared and given you these foods to eat. And read how Peter is freed to eat whatever food he wants. And you have the ability to eat whatever food you want. If you really want to eat bugs, fine. Whatever. But please, the people thing. Like, come on. All right, let's move on because I'm so done with this story. But unfortunately, we have to turn to another story where Crayola, the colorful drawing implement designer, Crayola crayons, or some Texans say crayons. I can't say it anyway. Crayons. Crayola, the designer, apparently posted this ad for normalizing. I'm just going to read this. Disabled trans bodies over the weekend. So Crayola, the colorful drawing implement designer, has intended to normalize disabled trans bodies. So that's something. I'm going to show you this, apparently in a now deleted Facebook post, which I'll post here because the internet is forever. Crayola wrote, quote, Julian Gavino, a.k.a. the disabled hippie, life coaching, pronouns are he, him, is a fashion model, writer, activist who identifies as transgender man. He was born with a progressive neurological condition, which is tragic, and I feel bad for this person on. And by the way, I'm going to read these pronouns, and then we're going to talk about what's actually happening here, but I'll continue on. Crayola wrote, Julian is passionate about advocating for his respective communities. As someone who grew up not seeing anyone who looked like him in the media, Julian is determined to normalize disabled and trans bodies in a fashion world. Crayola continued, quote, this is hashtag Disability Pride Month. Crayola celebrates Julian and everyone like him for their passion and creativity. Here is a closer up picture of Julian. So I'm going to say this as delicately and gently as I can. And if you're just listening, I'm going to have to describe this briefly. Julian, whom I feel bad for because this person is apparently wheelchair bound and that is tragic. But in this picture is also wearing some kind of very bright green men's blazer with some kind of metal bra over it. I'm just going to leave it at that and even clear the picture at this point. But, so apparently Julian was born a girl, but now identifies as a man, and Crayola is full support of this. So here's the thing. And what are crayons marketed to? I mean, generally, adults don't go, I need to write a paper, I need to write an essay, I need to give a presentation to my executive board, so I'm going to grab a crayon. That's not usually what happens, right? So a crayon is an implement designed for little tiny children to color scribbly all over the place, because that's what kids do. So is it appropriate to show and highlight and endorse this person who is a girl who now identifies as a boy who wears these clothes that are, I don't know what else to say, like sexually suggestive, to sell crayons? Anyway, fortunately, the tides are turning a bit, and parents and others pushed back to the degree that, as of right now, that Facebook post is gone. It has disappeared, though, as I mentioned, the internet is forever, which is why I posted and highlighted it here. So apparently, Crayola regretted this decision to the point that they pulled their post. And here's just a few of the comments that were received. Quote, really inappropriate content for children, wrote a person named Christy. Usually I buy a ton of supplies to donate to schools, presumably. This year we will be leaving Crayola out of the donation. Kids don't need to be taught about sexual preference or changing genders while trying to color, end quote. Another person wrote, thanks Crayola, since you've decided to make this political, I will no longer be purchasing your product, wrote a person named Ruth. And I'll give you maybe one or two more. Quote, stop. Children need to be protected from this, wrote a person named Charlotte. It is sad when I want to go against the school supply suggestions and not buy Crayola. Get off the woke bus, go woke, go broke. And I'll give you one more. Quote, I'm disgusted that you would push this on children. Exclamation, 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 wrote a person named Jennifer. Have you not paid attention to all the companies that have gone woke? Check out Disney stock lately. Nobody wants this pushed on children, end quote. And I would say, good job, parents and families. Keep it up. Do not stand for this ridiculousness and continue to put your money where your mouth is, because it clearly makes a difference, as this post has been obliterated mostly from the interwebs. And I'll go on to say, personally, pronouns do not change biology, no matter how hard you try. So, speaking of pronouns, ¿se hablas español, hermanas y hermanos? Okay. I am not great at Spanish, and I will admit that. I know a little bit, enough to get me by or get me in trouble, but we have to talk about the Spanish language, and specifically the Spanish language in Argentina. So, admittedly, again, I am terrible at Spanish. I'm working on it, but I do know how the language works. I'm actually somewhat of a grammar nerd. I've studied Greek and Latin and Spanish and Italian, a bit of French and German, and really appreciate how they operate because I think language is really, really important. That's just something that we have to understand, because with language comes power. And I mean that not in an authoritarian way personally, but that is how governments and other strong-willed people have used it for millennia at this point. And one thing that all of these languages and many other languages also have in common is gender. What that means is their grammar has male and female endings. It's a gendered language, and the gender connotes meaning. It makes a difference what gender a word is in. This is part of the language, and I've known for a while, because I'm a fan of language and grammar, both English and other, this pronoun and gender identity inclusion it's not going to work in these other language. Literally, it cannot work. To remove the gender endings from verbs, nouns, adjectives makes these language unintelligible. English, sadly, is a mishmash of so many other languages. The pronoun silliness has made it farther than it should. But, of course, everybody knows that it still doesn't make sense to call a girl him. Grammatically, it's just not real. That's not how language works. Yet this culture is trying to force us to do so. So we're going to get to Argentina and what they're doing with Spanish in a moment. But before we get there, we have to visit Dr. Joe Biden, who spoke at, and I'm just going to read this and then kind of spell it so you understand. Joe Biden spoke at the Latinx, or Latinx, depending on how you pronounce this made-up word, inclusion. I don't even know what to do with this. I'm going to spell this for you. INCLUXION luncheon. Latinx Inclusion Luncheon. Again, the problem with this is you're trying to change language or remove gender from language by adding in letters that you literally can't pronounce. How are we supposed to talk to each other if you can't pronounce the words that you've made up to remove gender from the words? It's just so wacky. So anyway, it stands to point out that even though the large majority of Hispanics reject this term Latinx or Latinx, whatever you want to say about it, the administration and many people continue to use this term. Who knows? Anyway, and Argentina is pushing back at this. We're going to get that in a moment. But I also think it's funny that at this event, Dr. Joe Biden called Hispanics breakfast tacos. So we really have to see this.
We'll help build this organization with the understanding that the diversity of this community, as distinct as the Bogotas of the Bronx, as beautiful as the blossoms of Miami, and as unique as the breakfast tacos here in San Antonio.
And I had even forgotten before we put that clip on that she said the I'm gonna try and do it. The Bogotas, Bogotas. I think she's trying to say bodega, like the sandwich shop, but anyway, that's where we are. So then she goes on to say that I guess Latinx people are diverse like breakfast tacos, and that's what everybody else took it as well. So you have the National Association of Hispanic Journalists who wrote a statement and said, using breakfast tacos to try to demonstrate the uniqueness of Latinos in San Antonio demonstrates a lack of cultural knowledge and sensitivity to the diversity of Latinos in the region. We are not tacos. End quote. Right. I mean, on a side note, or going back to an earlier note, are we talking about cannibalism again? No. That's a terrible joke. I apologize for that. That was my bad. But hey, like this is the problem when you start changing ridiculous language, and the taco thing was kind of a diversion. And it should be a joke. I don't think she's actually using it as a joke, which is the problem. That I think is using it. I think that was a serious statement. Like, this administration is so crazy that somebody, presumably not her, maybe she did, but somebody wrote this speech and thought that it was a great idea to call Hispanic people in San Antonio tacos. Like, should people be fired over this? Anyway, whatever. So, what I want to focus on is the language, because this was the Latinx Inclusion conference. And this ridiculous language change, just like the definition of anything, it just destroys language. Like, I can't pronounce it. You can't pronounce it. People don't want it, but it just destroys language and understanding. It doesn't create a richer definition. We even looked the other day. If you missed this, they've redefined female as someone that doesn't identify as male, and they've redefined male as someone that doesn't identify as female, thereby creating this circular thing that you just identify as whatever you want, and those definitions don't mean anything. It's not that they mean more than they used to. Now they just literally don't mean anything, and that's the problem that we come into when we start redefining things however we want, willy-nilly, rather than defining something as what it actually is, which is the way all language is supposed to operate. You say what you mean and mean what you say. Someone in the Bible said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Like, say what you mean and mean what you say. Like, definitions matter and truth matters and words matter. But this is the crazy world that we're living in, where we just redefine things. Now, some good news. This is now apparently not the case in Argentina with Spanish. The city government in Buenos Aires, the nation's capital, last month banned teachers from using any gender-neutral words during class and in communication with parents. This is actually a fantastic step. This report goes on to say the city's education minister said such language violated the rules of Spanish and stymied students' reading comprehension, to which I'll say, yes, that's exactly the point. You can't change language and then expect students to understand what in the world you're doing by adding crazy letters in where they don't belong and redoing language. This has been around for hundreds of years just because you don't like the way it's spelled and that it has connotations. It's like changing history to herstory. Like, I guess I get what you're trying to do, but that's not a word. History is not related to the masculine his. It's just a word. History. Herstory is not a word. Anyway, got off on a tangent there. So the city government in Buenos Aires has said to the education teachers and all, they can't use this weird non-gendered language anymore. And this policy is among the first anywhere to specifically forbid this use of gender-neutral language. This is really good. So prior to this, the reason they got into this space, and I should have wrote some of these out for you, but I'll just spell them so you can understand. Even if you don't know Spanish, I think this is going to make sense for you. Instead of amigos, the Spanish word for friends, some of these teachers were saying amigues, like amigos, amigos. amigues, which is not a Spanish ending. It's not a word. They just made up extra letters because they didn't want amigos, which is os, which is a masculine ending, a male ending. They didn't like that. So you have amigos, amigas, like masculine, feminine endings. Now they made amigues, which is nothing. So your friend, who is not male or female. This is where we're going, right? In place of todos, they would write, which means all, they would write todos. I can't pronounce it. Todxs. Pronounce that for me. Todxs. Todos. I got nothing, people. And some signs that they would put in their classrooms, for instance, bienvenidos means welcome, now says bienvenid @s, because bienvenidos uses the masculine ending os, so now you have to use bienvenid @s, because @ is a letter in an alphabet, except that it's not, because it's a symbol. This is, like, again, this is where I'm looking, like, we're going back to hieroglyphics now. Like, all of this texting shenanigans and emojis, like, we're just speaking in emojis now and not actual words and with actual letters that mean actual things. We're just making up symbols to convey things. But in this case, it literally doesn't make sense. So these changes, according to this article, which had been informally adopted by teachers in schools across Buenos Aires, were a deliberate effort to include people who do not identify as male and female in a language where many words are categorized as either masculine or feminine, as I mentioned. That's how Spanish works, French, Latin, Greek, German, Italian, a bunch more, right? So the article goes on to say gender-neutral language has scandalized linguistic purists. I love that, and I would agree. The Royal Academy in Spain, considered by many as the gatekeeper of the Spanish language, described the use of @ and x, which are used in place of o or a, that often signify a word's gender in grammatical Spanish. They said, quote, alien to the morphology of Spanish in a 2020 report. In other words, to us just regular people that aren't grammaticians, it doesn't make sense. You can't add those words into words because they don't make words. It's like, you have that bar on the top of your keyboard and it has all those symbols on it. So you just start smashing those. You just type, but then like smash one of those every once in a while. Like, that's not words. Come on, people. Anyway, the debate is also playing out in the United States with a gender-neutral term. This is from the article now. The gender-neutral term Latinx was added to a widely used dictionary in 2008. We just talked about that one. But even among Hispanic people, many have not heard of the term, and few, mainly young college-educated women, use it, according to a 2019 Pew Research survey. Right. They don't like it. We don't like it. Nobody likes it, except for a few really highly college-educated people who really want you to use it. Anyway, the moving around language, some experts say, is part of a broader challenge to the way society perceives gender. They say, quote, with non-binary people, language is just the tip of the iceberg, said Rodrigo Borba, professor of applied linguistics at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil. Quote, they are questioning on a deeper ideological level that gender is not connected to your genitalia and it does not only come in pairs, aka men and women. And he is exactly right on what's going on here. I assume from what he says that his conclusion is then we shouldn't use gendered language, but actually his point is correct. This new language is trying to remove reality from language and create categories of people that just kind of don't exist because this idea doesn't exist. This is the bigger question. If biology, science, reality, just reality itself, theology, and language agree, there are two genders, male and female. But culture wants to change all of these things to fit a tiny percentage of people. Should we do that? Should we change everything just for this minority of people who wants the world to be different than it really actually is? Here's an analogy in keeping with the theme, perhaps. See if you like this. You love Thanksgiving dinner with turkey and all the fixings. I know I do. Right before the holiday, you hear that one of your relatives becomes vegan and demands to have vegan food at your Thanksgiving feast. And you say, okay. But not only that, this relative demands that you actually remove any meat or animal products from the whole meal. So now nobody gets the turkey, nobody gets the fixins. You only get crunchy kale or something. Is this a valid request? Yet, this is what we're being asked to do. Change our entire society around a brand new idea that gender can be anything you want it to be. And you not only have to accommodate it, you have to change every aspect of your life and even your language to make this confused person feel comfortable. This is the problem, and this is the road we're going down. When you say, well, this doesn't affect me. No, if it doesn't already, it's going to, because your language is the very way you communicate to everyone around you, everyone in the world. And if you can't say what you mean and mean what you say, then we're all just babbling back and forth. And that doesn't lead to a good society. We have time for one more quick story today. And this one, this is just another weird one, but we have to talk about it. And we're back to California. So California, I haven't talked about you in a while. I'm sorry. I've forgotten you, but I haven't. So California, a school in California apparently allowed or was working towards having a Planned Parenthood clinic at the high school. Apparently, John Glenn High School in La Mirada School District was going to open a Planned Parenthood clinic on campus. So this is a real thing. I researched this a fair bit, that this school and the district wanted to open a Planned Parenthood clinic on the campus of a high school. So high school students going to school, math, science, English, and of course all the weird sex ed things that are now in schools, but also will be able to go to this Planned Parenthood clinic on campus. The proposed facility, according to the school district, would be able to write prescriptions and dispense drugs related to reproductive health, that's a euphemism, contraceptives, antibiotics, and insert non-surgical long-acting contraceptives. Physical examinations could also be conducted for STDs and referrals to other places. I would say probably other Planned Parenthood clinics that do other services, such as abortion, as we've talked about. This proposal states that the clinic will, quote, encourage students to involve their families in decision-making regarding reproductive health services, but it states that minors can consent to those services without parental consent or notification under California law. So hear that, and I think I have a slide for that. Let's see if I have that here. So this is parental consent and notification. So this is part of the proposal. You can actually go and read it online. You can find it out there. It's still up as of this recording. And so this is saying, and this is actually a California law, if you didn't know this, once your child turns 12 or 13, I don't remember what it is at this point because it keeps lowering, your child does not have to tell you about any of their medical things. In fact, you need a special permission from your child, 12 or 13, for instance, to look at their medical records. And I know this firsthand because this actually happened to me while I was in California. The doctor's office sent me a letter and said, we can't tell you anything about your child until they give us permission to look at their medical records. Yes, this is a real thing. I know you're sitting there like, that's not real. No, it's 100% real. So now we're combining all of these things. Planned Parenthood is going to have a clinic on a high school in California where your 9th grader goes in and gets some kind of service. We don't know what that is exactly. Could be birth control, could be hormone treatments to transition. We don't know. Could be any of those things. Could be referral to an abortion facility to have an abortion. And they don't have to tell you. No one has to tell you about this. As the parent of this minor student that, could be as young as, like, what's a 9th grader at this point? 13, 14? Like this is a really bad thing. This contract is intended to last 5 years, pending board approval every 5 years to continue. And it says other Planned Parenthood clinics do provide gender-affirming hormone therapy, so there's a very real possibility students will be referred off campus to receive this treatment. Again, parents may not ever know. In fact, the way it's written, according to one report, there's no way for parents to actually ever obtain this information because the contract asserts that all medical records are to be maintained by Planned Parenthood, and neither district staff nor students' parents or guardians may access the student's medical records without the written approval of the student. Ever. Period. You don't get to see that if you're a parent and your kid doesn't want to show you. Ever. There's no way to get access to this medical information. This is really, really a problem. And fortunately, in this instance, the good news is that this has not gone through so far. The plan is not going forward. The school district announced they have postponed the discussion of the Planned Parenthood clinic on the campus for now. The Norwalk La Mirada Unified School District Board of Education said they'll, quote, postpone discussion of board agenda line item 12A regarding the Planned Parenthood clinic at John Glenn High School, they said in a statement. As a result, action will not be taken this evening during the regularly scheduled board meeting, end quote. So I just want you to feel the weight of this. The state really wants your kids. They really want your kids to make medical decisions as young as possible and not tell you about them. They want to raise your kids. They don't want you to raise your kids. So I would just say to parents, as we're wrapping up here, please protect your children from this madness. And if possible, get them out of these government schools because clearly they don't have your students' best interest in mind, though they would say so. You, the parent, should have their best interest in mind and love them more than anyone else on this earth. I know as a parent, and you know as a parent, you love your kids the most. No one else loves them as much as you do. So act accordingly, protect them, figure out where they are. And yes, this is just one school in California. This is just one city in California. This is just one school district in California. But this is a test case, clearly. And this is the direction that the state wants to go. They want to free you from your kids and free your kids from you so that they can allow your kids to do whatever they want to do. And as we know, as parents, kids don't always know what's best for them. I mean, that's just the biggest understatement I've said today, right? We need to protect our kids, even from themselves, because they may not know what's best for them. And we may not either, but at least we have a couple more years on them on this earth, and that counts for something. So let's get to our verse of the day, because this is a good one for us today. Verse of the day is, let me hear in the morning of your steadfast love, for in you I trust. Make me know the way I should go. For you I lift up my soul, O God. Psalm 143:8. Thanks for joining me here at Church Public, and as always, I'm Matt Odegaard. Keep the faith.